Today, we're diving into a programming language that has some really strong opinions. It's called Merg-E, and its whole philosophy is built around this one pretty wild idea. What if a language could literally force you to write good code? And that really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world that's all about developer freedom and endless flexibility, could the real secret to creating amazing, safe, and maintainable code actually be, well, a bunch of super strict rules? Merg-E definitely thinks so.
So what even is Merg-E? Well, it's what you'd call a highly opinionated, domain-specific language. It's built for the Web 3.0 world. So think smart contracts, decentralized apps, places where one little bug can be absolutely catastrophic. So instead of giving developers a million choices, Merg-E just makes a lot of those choices for them. The goal is to get rid of common frustrations and just wipe out entire categories of errors before you can even make them.
And the very first problem it takes on is one that every single developer, every developer, has felt. You know the one. Code bases that are just a total mess. When everyone on the team has their own personal style, the code gets all jumbled and inconsistent. It's tough to read, an absolute nightmare to maintain, and it just becomes this perfect breeding ground for bugs. So Merg-E's solution, it's not some gentle suggestion. It's not a style guide that you can just, ignore. No, it's a mandate. It's a set of rules that are baked right into the compiler itself.
And this right here, this is the philosophy that drives the whole thing. The belief that unclear code is unsafe code. Think about it. If code is hard to read, it's hard to understand what it's actually doing. And if you can't be sure what it's doing, you can't be sure it's secure. For Merg-E, especially in the high-stakes world of Web 3, clarity isn't just a nice little bonus. It's a core security feature.
And to enforce this, Merg-E makes you use a specific coding style called rat-lift style. The rules are pretty simple, but they are totally non-negotiable. You've got to use a two-space indent, you need a new line after an opening curly brace, and every single line of code has to end in either a semicolon or another opening brace. That's it. And this comparison is what makes Merg-E just so different. That messy, all-over-the-place code on the left, that might work just fine in another language. But in Merg-E, it's a no-go. The clean, perfectly formatted version on the right isn't just good practice. It is the only way the code will compile. Anything else is just a flat-out syntax error. Now, this whole opinionated approach doesn't stop there. It also applies to another classic coding headache, trying to handle strings that stretch across multiple lines. Other languages have all sorts of weird, clunky ways of doing this. Merg-E's solution is, again, brutally simple and elegant. It gives us this special operator, the triple pipe. Now, it's called a pre-lexing operator, which sounds kind of technical, but all it means is that before the compiler even really starts thinking, it just scans through and glues together any lines connected by these pipes. It's a dead simple string joining tool, not some complex piece of syntax. And using it is just beautiful. You write the first part of your string, you pop the triple pipe on the end of the line, and you just continue on the next one. The result is super clean, totally readable, and there's zero confusion about what's going on. All right, now for what I think is the biggest and most innovative idea in Merg-E. It really builds on this whole philosophy of clarity. This is how the language tackles that universal developer problem, documentation that is always out of date. You know the pain, we've all been there. Your code is in one place and your documentation is in some totally separate file. So when you update the code, do you remember to update the docs? Come on, let's be honest. The answer is usually no. And over time, that documentation becomes useless, or even worse, it becomes dangerously misleading. Merg-E's solution is to just completely flip this entire relationship on its head. They call it reverse markdown. So instead of putting little snippets of code inside your big documentation files, you put blocks of documentation directly inside your code files. Check this out. This is the key difference right here. The standard way, right, is putting a code block inside a markdown file. Merg-E's approach just flips that completely. Using that same triple backtick syntax we all know, you create a documentation block. You see it labeled user_doc, and you put it right inside your source code. Your documentation now lives right next to the logic it describes. It's almost impossible to ignore it. And it gets even smarter than that. Merg-E actually has 3 different levels of documentation. You've got user_doc for those high-level explanations aimed at end users. Then there's dev_doc for other developers who just need to know what the code does. And finally, Implodoc for all the nitty-gritty details explaining how it actually works. And the payoff here is just huge. Because all this documentation is structured and lives right there with the code, a simple tool can just read the source file and automatically spit out beautiful, polished documentation. You can even tell it, hey, just give me the user doc for our public website, or give me everything, including the dev docs for our internal developer portal. It's incredibly powerful. So when you put all these pieces together, the strict formatting, the super clean string handling, and this inside-out documentation, you start to see that they aren't just a random collection of rules. They're all part of a single unified philosophy. At the end of the day, Merg-E really has one main goal: clarity. And it gets there with the 3 core features we just walked through. The mandatory indentation forces a readable structure from the get-go. That triple pipe operator keeps your string definitions clean and obvious. And reverse markdown physically ties your documentation to your code, making sure they can never drift apart. So what Merg-E does is make a really bold trade-off. It sacrifices some developer freedom, the ability to format your code however you want, to get these huge benefits in readability, maintainability, and safety. Now, that might feel a little restrictive, but the argument is that it's a small price to pay. And that brings us right back to our big question, the thought I really want to leave you with. Should more programming languages make this same trade? Should they be less flexible in order to be more clear?